What's up, squad? It's Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, for those that's been following along, recently the U.S. hosted the 2023 APEC meeting. So, APEC, not to be confused with OPEC, the oil petroleum exporting countries, APEC is the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. And more or less, APEC exists as a community for Pacific nations to promote better relationships and more freer and fair trade across the Pacific. So in 2023, the U.S. has hosted the annual APEC meeting in San Francisco, California. And what really drew my eyes or caught my interest was how cordial the relationship with China was. President Xi Jinping arrived to streets lined with Chinese Americans and Chinese migrants lining the streets holding American and Chinese flags. He was greeted by major CEOs such as Tim Cook and Elon Musk. I even saw at the table President Biden actually seeking out President Xi Jinping to shake his hand. So, based on recent moves by the US, I found this to be very, very interesting. Let's take a look down memory lane to see what I'm talking about. Remember Congressman McCarthy, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan? They did this in protest of Chinese interference and continual calls for annexation of Taiwan under a one China policy. These are the highest ranking Americans to visit Taiwan at that stage. Do you remember the creation of AUKUS in 2021 between Australia, the UK, and the United States? A security pact pretty much in the South Pacific, which is meant to be in contrast and a counterpoint for Chinese influence in the region. The numerous South Pacific island meetings with the U.S. going so far as to send Secretary of State Blinken and Secretary of Defense Austin out to Southeast Asia and the South Pacific, visiting major allies and building on relationships with countries such as Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and Fiji, to name a few. How about the recent nuclear technology energy transfer agreement between the United States and the Philippines to help them along with their energy needs through nuclear technology that the U.S. have? Continually inch closer and closer and closer to the normalization of nuclear relationships within that region. And you already know when you hear the word nuclear, if they can harness it for energy needs, how long until they can harness it for other than energy needs? South Korea, the stationing of nuclear submarines in South Korea on the Korean Peninsula, right next door to China. This is just a few of some of the basic moves that the U.S. have been making over the last couple of years to pretty much curb Chinese influence in Southeast Asia and the South Pacific. Now, this all go back to what we believe is the pivot to Asia started under the Obama regime as the West is seeing China rise and their influence spread across the world. The United States, in particular, the West in general, are looking for ways to curb that influence. Hence, pivot to Asia. And Biden has not disappointed with all these moves that are recently brought to your attention, that we can culminate into one string of continuous action to continue to strangle, or what I would say, mitigate Chinese influence in the region. So for all this to go on, and then the squawking of threats between the United States and China over their relationship with Taiwan, the intensifying antagonistic relationship in the South Pacific Islands, in the South China Sea. Look at Vietnam. Don't forget, U.S. been working on normalized relationships with Vietnam as well. When you look at that map of that South China Sea, you're going to have the Philippines, major U.S. ally in the east, in the islands, as well as on the mainland Asia, you're going to have Vietnam, former enemy of the U.S., but U.S. been trying to build that relationship as another way, you guessed it, to curb Chinese influence. So U.S. has been making all these moves to try to get the upper hand of China in this region. And these have been pretty overt moves. So it's very interesting to see how open and fair the U.S. was to the Chinese delegation at APEC. And I attribute this to a couple reasons. One, things may have got a little bit too heated between China and U.S. Let's not forget that during European expansion and colonialism of the world, it was the U.S. that stepped in and told the powers of Europe they did not want to carve up China, and China should remain intact under a one country. It was the U.S. who helped bring China into the WTO. Henry Kissinger himself, former Secretary of State, said he wanted to make sure that the U.S. was closer to Russia and China as they were between each other, which was relatively easy to do because, for all intents and purposes, and the foot cozying that's going on right now, Russia and China have rarely been natural allies. But these circumstances make strange bedfellows. And I think that's what really it goes down to, is these circumstances. The U.S. had a long-term arching strategy, it seems, to mitigate Chinese influence. The Ukraine situation was an opportunity they couldn't miss, so they had to take advantage of, to take Russia's strongest ally and make it its most threatening enemy. And then we just have the blow up and the Gaza Strip. And I think this is what really threw a wrench into the works, because now the U.S. is going to take all of their diplomatic energy, their health, their muscle, their arm twisting, and they're going to have to apply it to keep the world off of Israel. There's so many calls of protest and anger against what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip that U.S. is using all of its goodwill in its relationships right now to try to give Israel the space it needs to do to secure its border. So with this added pressure, along with the war with Ukraine and Russia, along with balancing out Iranian influence in the Middle East region, I think the U.S. is kind of picking their battles right now. And they say, look, we know China is a long-term strategic move, but it's no reason to push this thing along faster than it should be. And I think it was kind of a sign, just the slowing down of tension with President Xi Jinping in San Francisco and the way he was treated by the Americans as the host country, but also as, look, we have a relationship. America is going to continue to decouple from China and try to figure out ways to diversify its base. Of course, this is inherent into the big power game. But it's the pace is everything. And America is going to want to calm the temperature down with China, because right now, between Russia and what's going on with Israel and Gaza, I think the China-Taiwan situation might, the thinking heads in Washington, D.C. might think that's a bridge too far to take on at this moment. So we'll continue to monitor this situation, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Comment below. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Until next time, take care. Bantu up.